we started saying that, and then we started discussing what divinity was. And,
that's a really, really important point in my mind, because, like if you look at the Old Testament, the overriding message was always relationship with God. But through the New Testament, and specifically, the Jesus Christ story, was you are divinity.
yeah.
So it wasn't about separation, it was about you are.
Yeah, right.
So and just so many of the parables kept on pointing to, it's not about relationship any longer, it's about you are, find it.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think? Let me pose you a question, okay? In the context of what we're talking about now. If let's say you had to now teach from step one a group of young adults who had never heard of God or any type of religion at all, okay, where would you start to now try and communicate this divinity that we're talking about, okay? Where's the starting point? Where do you think is the starting point? I'm going to think about it too.
Well, my inclination is to, well, I suppose there's a couple of different, or probably a million different pathways, but if they are completely unaware, then it would probably be to get them to think about things when they were very young. When they didn't have preconceived ideas around what it meant in terms of, their engagement with the unfolding every day. And encourage them to remember that, because it kind of depends how old they are, but obviously the older we get, the more sort of conditioned and we build all this definition around who we are in this life, or what we are in this life, and I think it would probably be a starting point along those lines, but also based on what I know now, just using some of those practical demonstrations around around the question of who's observing,
Right. Yeah. Sorry, Donna, just to hold again.
You're right.
2,000
2,400 rand.
2,400.
Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah, it's actually slightly under that. Okay, but I said to him, send him 2,004. Okay. Sorry, darling.
No, you're right.
She's just sorting that out. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I know it's difficult now to get your thought pattern back again.
No, that's all good. No, that's all good. Yeah. So that would be my inclination anyway, is encouraging them to remember. Try and keep it as practical as possible, and encourage them to remember.
And just enlarge on that, encourage them to remember what?
Their experience with the everyday happening. So my proposition is that the older they get, based on experiences with parents and people they might meet in institutions like schools and things like that, all of a sudden it becomes around rules and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and your place within, whether it's an organisation or whether it's a group or a nationality or whatever it is.
Yeah.
really dehumanizes people.
Mm.
And I think it's, if you want to put a label on, it's about, remembering their humanity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What about you?
Sorry?
So what about you?
No, yeah, I was, at the same time you were talking, I was thinking I would probably start with, you probably fits with my character there. Is ask them a question, and say, where do you think you came from? Okay, and then the logical question is, do you feel you've got a purpose here? And where do you think you're going when you die? Okay.
It's funny you say that, because that's or a version of those questions are like a Zen koan. Like the one of their classic questions is, well, what did you look like before you were born?
Okay.
And what do you think you look like after you die?
Yeah, interesting questions, eh? Interesting questions. Because I think people often wonder, when you die, you keep the same form as you are now. Okay. And so, and did you keep that form until you were reincarnated again?
And I think part of that, it's a generalization, but part of that idea of keeping the same form is probably more symptomatic of your attachment to who you think you are.
Yes, absolutely. I'm sure of that too, because I think when you're not in the sort of a three-dimensional world, then you will take on the form that you want. Okay, it's like if you were gluttonous on this earth and you never stopped eating, okay. You get across there, there's no eating in that realm, but you keep on eating. Okay, you manifest in this food and you're eating it, and it's.
Well, I think another way of looking at it too is a lot of the traditional stories about, well, what does God look like? Oh, he's an old man with a big white beard sitting up in the clouds.
Yeah.
And then if you ask them, well, what do you think an ant's perspective of what God looks like? Oh, it's a big ant that sits up. So it's all just that projection, isn't it?
It is a projection, yeah. So you get there, and you project the image that you want people to see. Yes, okay, and yeah, and any of the emotions that you had.
And I think, wouldn't it be a wonderful opportunity too? Because if you had, an audience like that, that didn't have the view that they had to go to a church or a religion to uncover this, because the other sort of sorry fact of human history is that when organisations get created, notwithstanding their intention, or their good intentions or whatever, the organisation, once it's created, at some point in time becomes self-serving.
Yeah.
So if there's one wonderful message about that journey of discovery is that keep it personal.
Yeah.
Take responsibility for it. Make it your life passion of discovering who or what you really are. In one sense, discovering what you really are is probably more open-ended than who you really are.
Yeah. And then they would probably, if they were part of my family, they'd probably say, well, why? Why must I actually ask those questions? Okay, what is the reason for asking those questions? And I think that would be a valid question, a valid reason, because you're talking to them for the first time. They don't know about any God or any religion. You're now introducing them to this concept. There must be a bigger picture that is getting to the point of understanding that this life is only a tiny little part of the infinity.
Do you think there would be a possibility that if they're starting from zero knowledge, that they may in fact already know?
Yeah, that could be a very good point, an interesting point, because but they don't know that they know. Okay?
No, that's right.
You see, it's like the soul that arrives, let's say, in this incarnation, and it is unaware. Okay.
From your own personal experience, I mean, when you were very young, because like some of my earliest memories, I'd always had this nagging question about, like, is this real? Like, is this, I didn't use those words, but I just had this.
I know what you mean. Yes, I know what you mean.
Overwhelming sense that that I felt like an alien. I felt
yes.
I felt like an outsider. So
yeah. I did too, definitely, but certainly not in those thoughts or those words. But
no.
Yeah. I would go into let's call it a cathedral, particularly the one in Grahamstown where I was born and bred, and it was in the centre of town, like cathedrals mostly are in South Africa.
You weren't bred either, by the way. That's where you grew up. You breed sheep and cattle. You don't breed Michael Plumsteads.
No, true. Yeah, it's where I grew up, and I'd walk into this at any time of the day, or into this cathedral, and there was I always I could just sit down in the pew. I mean, here I was a schoolboy, and I would sit down in the pew, and I would just sense something. I would sense a really good feeling. I'd feel some sort of resonance with something, and there was just like an energy in that Anglican cathedral. Yeah. So yeah, it was from a young time, and I think also, my mother was always forthcoming to discuss anything. She was well, I'm not sure when she started as far as my life is related, but I didn't really knew her as a Christian Scientist, so she always looked at a really deep spiritual take on everything. And at some of it, I mean, now I understand it, but then even as a young adult in my 20s, I couldn't go along with it. I couldn't understand, where she was coming from. And I sort of kept on. I don't know if I certainly supported her, and I never argued with her, but she knew that I didn't understand where she was at. Okay, and then she would try and find. I think this first step that we're talking about now. What would be the first step? I think she was trying to find that connection, that first step. Okay, and I think we probably found it when I first connected with Logos.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I spoke to her about Logos, and I introduced her to Moya, and then we were like on the same wavelength after that. It's just all like something happened. I mean, I can't explain it. I can't pinpoint it to a particular time, but just that happened. And then we were talking the same concepts, the same language. Yeah. And I think that's when you're asking somebody like the question we're talking now, I think probably that's what's got to happen. As you say, they probably know it all there, but the awareness is dormant. Okay. and what will it take to activate that dormancy?
Well, in Jesus' case, quite a lot.
Yeah, he had a hectic time, man.
Well, that's right. I mean, but he used miracles, he used healing, he had disciples, but not one of those things in their own right answered the question that you just, described through your relationship with your mother. Not one of them.
Yeah, true. Yeah. How's your mother? What was her spiritual relationship when you were growing up with yourself?
It was a little passive in one sense. I mean, early in my childhood, like she sent us off to Sunday school and stuff like that, but we weren't terrible. Myself and my brothers weren't terribly excited by it. But
Yeah.
So, and ironically, for the three of us, we, of our own volition, sought our own paths. At the risk of putting labels on people. My older brother, he's been a member of the Mormon Church for most of his adult life, I guess. When he met his wife, she was a practicing Mormon, and he took that up and has been that way ever since. My younger brother, he's a practicing Buddhist, so so it's not about right or wrong. I guess it's whatever path, you get.
And when they describe what path you're on, what do they say?
Well, I think I'm a bit of a mystery.
That's interesting. You got such diverse, Yeah.
But my mother, she grew up as in a very strict sort of. Well, it was sort of interesting because her father was a Catholic, but see, he died as a prisoner of war when she was like, 11 years of age or something. So her recollection of him, of his spiritual faith, was probably quite limited, and somewhat tainted too, because when he was, away overseas during the war, it was, she received visits from, like Catholic nuns and stuff like that, and their response wasn't at all spiritual. It was all just about, be part of the organisation sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, and my father, he never really spoke about it a whole lot, but from what I can understand, when he was young, he was, quite an avid Christian, but something happened along the way, and he outwardly, would refer to himself as agnostic. But I'm almost certain though that, on his path, in his older years, he was re-energized around spiritual practice, but he never spoke about it.
Okay. Yeah. And my father used to, I mean, he would say, what it says in the Bible from dust to dust. Okay.
Yeah.
That's it. We're going nowhere except into this. But he was a great one to quote the Bible on that one verse all my life.
Yeah.
And and my mother would just humor him. And that was it, that's what he believed. And now my brother is just like my father. Our father, just the same. Like, it's a lot of nonsense and spirituality stuff. Okay, you're dead, right? That's what he tells me. Wake up, man, wake up. Tell me.
Who's he trying to convince?
Yes, I've often said that. And yeah, it's so interesting because even to this day, with any type of, he doesn't go along with me and my philosophy on these jabs that everybody's getting for viruses and things.
Mm.
I send him stuff that is anti the vaccinations and so on, and he comes with absolute truck and rubbish, rubbish, and yet at least once a week he sends me something that is confirming what I'm saying. Okay, so it's like, where do you get it from? Okay, why do you even read it if you're so anti it? No?
Yeah.
So, but he was
Yeah.
like that. He's like that with religion as well, and so yeah, yeah, we all strange at the moment. I think we all got and quite. I think not dogmatic. I think we all got things are getting, whatever we're feeling, they're getting stronger in one way or another way.
That's true. There is a magnification of.
That's it. Magnification of what we believe in or what we know, maybe even. Okay. And yeah. And so I can see that with like the extreme authors, like my brother, for example. And even with Sue's son, that we had the things with too. He's so strongly in one direction.
It's interesting, isn't it?
It is interesting, and I think we could probably talk about it quite easily. Definitely, the universe as such is, or the the physical planes, the three-dimensional plane universe, is definitely speeding up. Okay, and the frequency is raising, and there's just generally, I think the universe is moving into another cycle, and maybe even into.
Can't help but think that maybe that the ego or consciousness or whatever you want to call it, that voice, that narrative, seems to be more oriented towards generating fear, isn't it? So it's sort of almost trying to kick up a bit of dust along the way, sort of thing. So
yeah, I mean, certainly the satanic influences are doing that, and certainly everything around us, like the news, TV broadcasts, and the media, and so on. Now, do you think that is just part and parcel of what we're discussing, that they are influenced more strongly now by the
well, it's not news, is it? It's not news. It's just propaganda.
Sure, but it's in that propaganda, in that direction of wanting to convince you either something they believe in or that they are forced to believe in. I don't know, but it is quite pathetic in it, and it's bizarre when you just look at it coolly and calmly. It's just bizarre, and you think, why can't other people just see that? Okay, and there's more of that now, in the last year, and so, you and I just sort of, I guess, back off, and we let the water flow, whereas people on the sort of more negative side, or they are becoming quite aggressive, and but I don't know, what's the response? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I was listening, to one of the chapters in that book that I'm listening to at the moment, that Resurrecting Jesus, and he was talking about parables, and one of the parables that he was talking about was, when he was out on the boat and the storm was raging, and Jesus just slept at the front of the boat while the disciples who were on board were racked with fear and panic, and and woke him, and he sort of said to him, "So what are you Like, what are you frightened of? and the way that this author described the parable when he commanded the waves and the wind to be still was that's that when you reach a certain level of awareness, well, and take a step back, all of that stuff that you're perceiving around you, those storms in inverted commas, are raging within our conscious. And so the ability to tell the wind and the sea to be still is the parable for just stopping that internal dialogue. It's just stop it. Stop.
Right.
And not to do anything, but just to stop. So which is that dialogue which is always there, always nagging, creating fear, whipping up trouble, and all this, and it's just
emotions.
And emotions, and it's just like that internal storm. It's just stop. And there's nothing to fear, there's nothing to worry about, it's just stop. Go back to the source, which is stillness and silence.
So. I've seen that parable as water has always represented for me emotion. Okay, so a stormy sea is a stormy emotion. Okay, and so then you call on divinity, for help. Okay. And so just the calling on of it, is part and parcel of the solution, because now divinity, in a sense, puts up the hands and says, "Be quiet, man." But you're saying it to yourself because you know it, because you're calling on divinity. Okay. So it's done.
That's right. And in that instant,
Yeah.
So for those who don't have the awareness, it appears to be like a miracle. It's like who on earth is this person who can speak to the wind and the waves and bring it to calmness? So,
but then if you had a certain level of consciousness, that parable, you take it at face value. Okay. And then you sort of praise the divinity. Okay. And
which is still a separation, though, isn't it?
It is a separation. I agree with you, but isn't that a first step?
Oh, absolutely is. Yeah, it's not about right or wrong or anything, but I think that in the context of the overriding, message from, the Christ life is, it's not separate.
Yeah.
It's not separate. It's one and the same. So.
Yeah.
And when you ponder that, as you dig into the deeper meaning, like the first, or not the first, but one of the things that comes to mind so quickly is just, my goodness, what would life on this planet look like with an awakened humanity, however you want to describe it, a soul-sensitive humanity, or a whatever. What would that look like?
I think that's a lot what Alatra looks at as well.
I think so. I mean, they still talk about organisation in many respects, but if you think about what Moya even talks about, it's not organisation. It's just that one with divinity. Organisation falls away. You don't need it.
Yeah.
Do not. God doesn't need an organisation.
No, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. It's interesting because it, in the class today that I had a lot of people in class today, and I was doing the story of Dr. Jane Goodall. Okay, and it actually went well, and everything was well. And then at the end, I finished 10 minutes early and was just chatting. And then two people particularly. I mean, as I said, there were quite a lot, and they were, really in awe of what Jane Goodall is currently doing. I mean, she's still alive at 87, still running around, making people aware of that there is hope. A very positive person, and I sort of reached that 50 minutes in the class, feeling upbeat, and definitely I could sense people upbeat. But it just took two people when we were communicating, and the one person whose name was Paula said, these people, all they want to do is go around and in order to collect funds for themselves, and who knows what happens to those funds, and that like deflated me. And then the other one said, the Indian government is in India. The Indian government, bring iodine in en masse, and they put it in all the food and stuff, and people get kidney problems, and then they try and heal the kidney problem. And I thought, what on earth has that got to do with what we're talking about? We've just spent 50 minutes of talking about it, but it was enough to take the energy level down. You know what I mean? And, so it is so easily done when you really are in a community of people that are in harmony with you. They resonate with.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's just pop a wedge in there and create separation, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly what it did. Yeah. Anyway.
Very interesting. But and the challenge is that in some respects, encouraging that level of awareness, so that when that thought enters those people's minds, whatever that thought is, that they can catch it, see it and catch it. So.
Yeah.
But I think that's a big part of the age in which we live, is that, my opinion is,
Yeah. But I mean, there were a lot of people in the class, and I think we've got to acknowledge those people who do resonate. I mean, the one person at the end of the class said to me, "You've really awakened something in me, because while I was listening to you, I ordered her latest book."
Oh wow!
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, and you think, okay, you've reached one person, and the book is called The Book of Hope, and so it's obviously what she needed, what she wanted, and I have no doubt that next year sometime she will come back into one of my classes and say, "I've read the book," and we'll have a discussion on it. Yeah.
It's it's an interesting area, isn't it?
Yes, it is, definitely. I'm looking forward to my class where I've researched Findhorn. I told you about that on Sunday, and I was going to. The class hasn't come yet. It's the last day of the year, I think, or the second last day of the year.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it's, for me, it's I love what they stand for. Okay, and to me, although they never talk about religion or anything like that, it's always spirituality. They connected with their divinity, and they talk about divinity. They talk about that connection, but that's not their purpose. Okay, their purpose is to live it. Okay, in all the senses that Elijah would talk about as well.
Yeah, that's the invitation, isn't it? To seek and cultivate that connection, and to have it show up in your everyday living, isn't it? So,
That's the key, is to have it show up in your everyday living, so you can describe that everyday living as heaven on earth.
mm, mm,
Okay, so I mean, it's easy to describe for yourself how heaven would look in some sort of imaginative way
mm,
of peace and harmony and all the words that one uses.
yeah, that's an interesting thing too, because I guess one of the things which is like one of the ideas which has sprung up just by listening to this book, and I'm only like a third of the way into it, is that idea of heaven on earth. And again, the idea of separation is that heaven is somewhere else, but it seems to me, the more I've reflected on it and contemplated it, is that heaven's right here, right now. Like that's the thing. It's not somewhere that you go to; it's somewhere that is here now.
Yeah, it's you were talking about the parable of the boat and the sea and so on, and the emotion and calm. It's inside us. Okay, it's not, even here. Might be a separation. Okay, there's there's here and there's here, but if the here is inside you, because you can experience heaven on earth depending on how calm and collected and you are inwardly. Okay?
Yeah, and this notion that you have to die to go to heaven. I mean,
Yeah, I know that's such an unfortunate situation that has evolved out of. I don't know where it actually came from. Okay.
Well, it probably came from a lot of the religious organisations that have to justify their existence.
Yeah, I guess so.
So whilst they've got you, they're going to keep you.
Yeah, I guess so. Because I can't recall anywhere in the Bible, in the New Testament, where it refers to anything along that sort of subject.
No, it doesn't really, does it? I mean, Jesus spoke repeatedly about heaven on earth. So
yeah,
the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven. It's within you. It's here. So
yeah.
He never said, when you die, this is where you'll go. It's like, no.
Yeah.
And when he did talk about death, it was sort of more in the context of rebirth, which is something you do now.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Correct. Okay. But it's also interesting, because while you were talking, I was thinking about, he was crucified, died, and on the third day he rose. Okay. And clearly, from what I've read outside of the Bible, he did actually physically rise. Okay. And he did then, went off to India and spent his rest of his life down there in India. But also, is there some sort of symbology in the fact that you die and on the third day you rise again? Okay, because I've used that concept if I'm going to make a major decision in my life, and I've sort of brought my kids up also knowing this. I sleep on it for 3 nights. Okay, and then I make a decision. Okay, and it makes a world of difference. Okay?
And we should explore that three night thing that you've just described too, because I sort of wonder whether part of that 3 night thing is your innate ability to listen deeply, not to analyze, not to strategize, not to plan and scheme. It's just your innate ability to sit there, sit in a metaphorical sense, and be open to divine guidance.
Yeah, definitely. It's the only way that you can truly connect to the divinity, is when your conscious, active mind is
shut
not
up.
Yes, shut up. Yes. Yeah, and it's true. I mean, if we do talk about it in the future, so many examples that I've used, and quite serious ones too. where so, but who knows? Who knows if you'd made the other decisions or hadn't gone along with what you were sleeping on.
But isn't that grace in action too? That unless there's a particular thing that needs to be learnt, is that notwithstanding the final decision that you do land on, is that pathway from there. At the time it might seem like absolute disaster. Why have you forsaken me?
Yeah. Yes.
But then reflecting on it after the event, quite often it's like, oh well, if that never happened, this wouldn't have happened. So
yeah. But also in the positive sense, and you've been offered something that is quite profound. Okay?
Yeah.
And then you sleep on it, and then you turn it down.
Yeah.
Okay? And,
that's right. And that's what they sort of say, don't they? Like, be careful what you wish for.
Yes. Yeah. That's true.
Yeah. Anyway. So, are you around on Sunday, or what is?
Yes.
Yeah. So
yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I will be around. Yeah, absolutely.
Will you?
Yeah. So we should plan to continue on as normal then. Yes.
Yes, that would be great.
Okay.
That would be great.
Sounds wonderful.
Yeah. Okay. Until then.
Wonderful. Thanks for tonight again, as always.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Okay. Take care.
Go well. Thank you.
You too. Bye. And have a good Christmas to you and Sue as well. Yeah.
Oh, thanks very much. And to your entire family. Okay.
Thanks.
Everybody. Okay. Including grandchildren.
That's right.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye.